state of the union, so to speak, for middle of the season. I'm going to have Mike Spanier and our other regional coordinators chime in as well on things that they're seeing at observations and through film and those kinds of things. So I would start by saying again, like our previous meetings we've had, if you could stay on mute, that would be helpful. But if you do have a question or anything at all, rules, mechanics, philosophy, doesn't matter, throw it in the chat, and our clinicians, our coordinators will assist with that, and we'll address those as we go. So I would say from my standpoint at the league, I would say relatively few complaints or issues from coaches. Not that we get a lot in a typical year anyways, but I would say it's knock on wood, been relatively quiet. And I think that speaks to the work that all of you are doing each week to give kids a chance to play high school football, and you're working with them professionally as best you can. And of course, there's always things we can clean up, certainly, but I think by and large, fewer complaints than typical at this time of year. So keep up the good work. Just going to touch on a few things that we've seen and answer any questions that you might have. Just a reminder as well that our coordinators chose to require viewing of the training tapes for state tournament consideration. Again, to get credit for those, you got to watch those on Arbiter and not on YouTube. I do put them on YouTube because our coaches get these videos as well. And I would say, with few exceptions, the coaches have been very receptive to receiving the training tapes and the memos as well, and they like knowing what officials are being told, not so they can catch you in a gotcha type moment, but they want to know how to best coach their kids and put them in the best position to be successful. And if something is going to be called a certain way, or there's a certain philosophy or a certain way of handling situations, they like to know that. And I think that's probably helped us in some cases by them knowing, hey, we're looking out for this certain thing. We need to be on the up and up on that because officials are aware of it, and those kinds of things. So I would tell you that coaches have been pretty receptive to that. The first thing I'll talk about relative to the memos has been our point of emphasis on offensive holding. I would tell you in years past, we were calling too many fouls that really didn't rise to the level of what we want for offensive holding. And like we've talked about in our clinics and in the training tapes as well, that when we call really any foul in high school football, it can be really killer. It's significant yardage, especially when we're talking about offensive holding deep in the offensive backfield. You're talking about a 15 to 20 yard penalty potentially, which for high school kids is really a difficult task to get that yardage back. So that doesn't mean we don't call fouls that are there, but what it means is we want to make sure that these are material restrictive fouls, quality fouls. And that's not just holding, that's every foul. I want to make sure that they're quality fouls. And the nice thing about football is we don't have to throw the flag instantaneously. This isn't basketball. This isn't other sports where they expect you to have a call a little bit faster. We have time to process. And if there's a late flag, there's a late flag. I've had those over the course of my career in football and basketball, baseball even. And the the coach would say, well, that was awfully late. And my response is, well, at no point did you say it was incorrect. So, late doesn't mean that it's wrong. In fact, more often than not, when we're late, it means we took our time, we took in all of the information, and then we put down flags for quality fouls. So just for offensive holding, again, point of attack doesn't mean that we're not going to call tackling out in the middle of the field, even if it's away from the play. If they just tackle somebody, we're going to call that. That's really unnecessary. But if it's, marginally restrictive stuff away from the point of attack, we want to stay away from that. That has nothing to do with the play. If it's a takedown, we're going to have to call those because that kind of incites ill will. But if you're talking about just a grab and restrict, hook and restrict away from the play, we don't want those called because that player who's being blocked, pretty unlikely they're going to make the play on the other side of the field. And they're going to run past 6, 7, 8 other players to make the play. Pretty unlikely. So we want to stay off of those. But if it is that point of attack, we know that our next criteria is, does it have a material restriction on the person being blocked? And when we're talking about that, it means it takes a step away from them. It drops their shoulder. It spins and turns them at the point of attack. Those are the kinds of things we're looking for when it comes to material restriction. If a player grabs someone by the jersey and that player continues to run at full speed, then that's not a very good hold. They're obviously not restricting them if they're still able to run at the same speed as if they weren't being blocked at all. So, jersey grabs, I know that historically we've seen flags on those kind of plays, but if they're able to run through it, that's not something we want. They're not material restricting that player is being blocked. Another thing just to be aware of and be careful of umpires in particular is rip moves. If we don't see the whole action start, develop, and finish, we have a tendency to put flags on the ground for rip moves when in all actuality, the defensive player is the one who put themselves in that position. And so what I mean by that is a defensive player rips their arm underneath the armpit of an offensive player, typically in close line play. And if we get to that late, what does it look like? It looks like that offensive player is restricting the defensive player when actually the defensive player is the person who put themselves in that situation. And so just need to be careful on rip moves or on any block for that matter, or any foul we're going to call. We need to be able to see the whole action start, develop, and finish. And that's a little bit more challenging with 5-person because we only have 5 sets of eyes, which means we can't afford to ball watch, can't watch the runner when they have the ball in their possession if they're not a threat to foul or be fouled. Our vision has to be on blocks. It just has to be. And we can live with missing 5-yard, 10-yard kind of things, but we want to make sure we get safety fouls. And the best way that we're going to do that is to make sure that we focus at the point of attack on blocks. That way we can pick up a legal block below the waist, clipping, blindside block, etc. Those are the kind of things we want to make sure that we get. And I would tell you, even at the higher levels, those are things that we are missing at other levels of football because we are not concentrating on our mechanics and our primary area of responsibility. And we need to trust our crewmates that they're going to handle what they need to handle at the point of attack. And if it's backside, that means we need to be more active and engaged as line of scrimmage officials. If it's backside, if the ball goes away from us, let's come out onto the field and pick up backside blocks. If it's in the middle of the field, when the play is over, let's just not camp on the sideline. We're going to have to do an accordion. Back judges, same. You have to be active run block officials. I know that the passing game is your baby, but we need to be really active as run officials in the middle of the field, considering that the umpire is now in the offensive backfield and they're focusing on those blocks at the line of scrimmage. But I would tell you at all levels of football, particularly high school and college football, the biggest complaints are we're missing illegal blocks below the waist. We're missing blindside blocks. And to a lesser degree, offensive holding, but I would say they're more concerned about safety related fouls. And again, we're missing those because we're not mechanically sound. We're not looking where we need to be looking, especially at the back judge and line of scrimmage positions. We need to make sure that our eyes are on blocks out front of those plays. So that's what I would say about offensive holding. And then finally, with offensive holding, remember, we need to be able to put it into a category. Is it hook and restrict, grab and restrict, takedown, hook and turn, those kinds of things? Because if we call offensive holding, as we've talked about, the natural question from the coach is, what did he do? Well, if we can explain it was at the point of attack that there was material restriction and give it a category, it's pretty easy to explain to the coach what exactly they did to earn an offensive holding call. But if we can't put it in a category, it's going to be very difficult to tell the coach what they did. And if we can't tell the coach what happened, then we probably shouldn't have put a flag on the ground in the first place, is what I would say. So Mike Spanier and I talked about this afternoon. I would tell you that my belief is that coaches by and large are pleased with our threshold of fouls, in particular with offensive holding, that we're calling the big ones and we're leaving the ticky-tack stuff go, where I think in the past we saw a higher tendency to call ones that really didn't have a material restriction or any effect on the play at all. So I think we're doing a pretty good job with it. Just stay the course and just remember those kind of pieces when we are evaluating for offensive holding. Another thing that observers are seeing, and we've talked about this in training tapes as well as some of the memos, is just our back judge mechanics on scrimmage kicks on punt plays. And we're seeing back judges come up way too soon. We can stay back and officiate forward. And in fact, we can stay back the entire time and still be just fine. It's way easier to officiate that play forward. If we come up too quickly and now we're even up with the return man, we get straight line and stacked, and now we can't see anything out to the side or the peripheral of the return player, which means we're going to miss illegal blocks potentially. It also doesn't put us in a very good position to judge whether something or contact with the receiver would constitute kick catch interference. And so we just need to be careful on when we choose to come up. And if we're going to default to anything, let's default to staying back and just officiate in a stationary position, officiating forward. We can always come up later. There's no hurry to come up. And besides, I would tell you on punt plays and free kicks for that matter, I would say maybe a handful of times in my whole career, maybe less, have I ever heard a coach complain about a spot on a punt or a free kick. So that's not their priority, and that shouldn't be ours either. Doesn't mean we want to miss the spot by 5 yards, but I would tell you, if we're worried about the spot, we're kind of worrying about the wrong thing. Let's worry about blocks. Let's worry about the safety of the return player. Do they signal and so forth? And even if they signal, we still have time to kill that, and the kicking team is supposed to know that they can't hit him, regardless of whether we're on top of it or blow the whistle. But then once we do kill the play, we can come up nice and calm, officiate the dead ball action, clear the players to their sidelines, and then we can move on with our other responsibilities. But I think we're doing a pretty good job at referee, umpire, even line of scrimmage. I think we're doing a pretty good job there mechanically, and we've talked about that. pretty extensively in the tapes as well. But I think just back judges just really, avoid that temptation to move forward, because it puts us in harm's way as well. Takes our vision away from us as far as officiating blocks, because the closer we get to that return player, our vision goes from 10 to 2, and it just shrinks like this, because the closer we get, our vision shrinks. So let's stay back, officiate forward. There's no hurry to move forward and officiate those plays. So another aspect, just continuing to work with coaches when they have questions, and work with the head coach, when you can. Kill them with kindness, understand that they're under a lot of pressure. At the same time, I would tell you, I've explained to the ADs that the officials need to be supported in their work as well. And so it's a two-way street on respect, both officials and coaches. And I think we can all, take a step back and be as professional as possible in our dealings. And sometimes it's just telling the coach, I understand your frustration. I'll take a look for that. You know what, if it happened the way you said, then we missed it. Now I wouldn't admit that you miss things about 15 times in a game, but sometimes we just need to fall on the sword and tell the coach, yep, we missed it, and just move on to the next play. Coaches are going to make mistakes. Players are going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. So kill them with kindness, be professional. And I think something that can help us with all of that is, again, slowing ourselves down, slow down what we're doing, slow down our mechanics. I think as is typical, when we go too fast, we make mistakes. And we've talked about that with pace of play. Let's put the ball on the ground, umpires between 28 and 32 seconds every time, with exception of the end of the second, fourth quarter, time's a factor, but otherwise that's our goal, to get it down in that time frame. And that will give our line of scrimmage officials and our back judges time to accordion in, because as we just talked about, we want them to be active run officials, especially. And if we're going to expect them to accordion in and officiate dead ball action, then we need to give them time to get back to their position and have an opportunity to do their pre-snap routine. And if we're putting the ball on the ground in 2 seconds, that does not give them the opportunity to do that. So let's make sure that we take our time, give everybody a chance to be in position to officiate. I have a couple more things I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Spanier and some other coordinators for things that they're seeing. Last week, and I'm going to put this in the memo this week, but last week we had a rash of inadvertent whistles, more than I remember happening in a single week. And coaches weren't upset about that. It's just, I heard from a variety of observers and other people at games that those had occurred. And I think we handled them, the aftermath correctly. But I think the first preference, I think, for all of us is to not have one in the first place. And I think what's happening with the inadvertent whistles, one, I think we have the whistle in our mouth way too much. Umpires, line of scrimmage, if you want to, even referee, if you want to have the whistle in your mouth at the snap, and then when the ball snapped, you drop it, totally fine. I do that. I get that as a mechanic. But we shouldn't have it in our mouth throughout the down. And I think that's why we're running into this, to this issue of having inadvertent whistles, is that if it's in your mouth, we could have just a gut reaction that a runner is down or out of bounds or whatever happens to be. We put air in the whistle and now we're stuck. And so dropping it, physically grabbing it and putting it in your mouth when you know that you have to blow it and then blowing the whistle is going to lead to less inadvertent whistles. I think the other piece of it is, as we just talked about, we're going too fast. If you don't see leather, we can't put air in the whistle. If there's a huge pile up and we don't know where the ball is, we can't blow the whistle. The players need to know that the play is over. When we have a huge pile up, the play, is most likely over, but we're not going to blow the whistle unless we see it. And I would tell you, here's an example. We had and this happened on Friday, we had a runner on a dive play right up the middle, pretty typical play. There's a pile up, line of scrimmage official blows his whistle. Meanwhile, the quarterback is running down the sideline with the football in his hand. And it's a horrible feeling when that happens. But again, if we're not seeing leather, can't put air in the whistle. And I think the third thing is we only want the covering or responsible official to put air in the whistle. I think we see way too much mirroring of signals and mirroring of whistles, and that only gets us in trouble. If you're making a signal or you're blowing the whistle, you're telling me that you know how the ball became dead. So if the ball goes out of bounds on one sideline, we should not have a stop the clock or a whistle from the other line of scrimmage official. How do you know if the clock's dead? And if you're too busy looking at your partner to mirror signals with him, who's officiating the dead ball action on your side of the field would be my question. So let's officiate our primary area of responsibility well, trust our partners that they'll do the same. And I think when we do that, when we just have primary covering officials responsible for whistles and signals, I think we're going to have way less of these inadvertent whistle situations come up. And make sure we review the rules on inadvertent whistles. And we're talking about 423. It's on page 48. Review those aspects. I think in most cases last week, what we had was a runner was in possession of the ball. The official thought they were down or just blew it inadvertently. And they properly, I think in the cases that I was aware of, gave the team in control the chance to replay the down or to take the result of the play. So I think we handled the aftermath correctly, but obviously all of us know that our preference is just not to have inadvertent whistles in the first place. And just to piggyback on some of the things I talked about relative to whistle control, back judges should virtually never have the whistle in their mouth almost the whole game. Yet I see on film quite a bit. I see back judges with whistles in their mouth. And I'm not really sure why we're doing that, because outside of a pass that you're responsible for, or a punt play where you're responsible for shutting it down, there really isn't a reason for a back judge to blow their whistle. So let's keep the whistle out of our mouth as much as possible. Line of scrimmage, umpires, referees included. And when it's needed, take it physically, put it in your mouth and blow the whistle. And then let's stick to covering officials or covering officials responsible for the whistle and the signals. So the other thing that it will also be in the memo, and thanks to Mike Graff for pulling some language together for me. We've seen, as discussed on some of the tapes, helmets coming off of players during the down, and we've even seen situations where it was due to the result of a foul. So a couple things there. One, again, let's officiate point of attack, get our primary area of responsibility and so forth, because if people get helmets ripped off of them, we got to see why that occurred. Did it happen just because it wasn't tight enough? Wasn't the chin strap wasn't on? Those kinds of things, or was it an actual face mask or illegal helmet contact, hands to the face, those kinds of things. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if we determine that it's not due to foul, as we've talked about on the tapes, mechanically we're killing the clock. We're making sure that the team or that player knows that he needs to go out for a play. Okay. And let's give that team time to replace him. I'm seeing, and this happens at all levels. So it's not, a criticism of high school referees. This happens at all levels. I see the referees winding the game clock up and the guy's like 2 steps out of the, off the field. He hasn't even left the field yet. And they don't even have a replacement in for him, and we're already winding the clock up. And no one's a fan of clock management and getting the game going more than me, but I would tell you that's way too fast. Slow it down. Let the team have an opportunity to replace him, get him out there, then make sure everybody's ready to officiate, and then make sure that the back judge is aware of what the play clock should be, offensive or defensive helmet. And then just a reminder, and this has been a piece that I think people have been confused on. We cannot buy that particular player back into the game with a timeout. And that is true at other levels of football, but that's not true in high school football. The only way that they can come back is if we have an intermission of sorts. So halftime, an intermission between overtime periods, those kinds of things. That's the only way that they can come back. Do I think that'd be a nice rule change in the future? Sure, but that's not where we're at currently. And so I'm going to include that language in the next memo as well. And again, thanks to Mike Graff for pulling that together. Pretty detailed on when they can and can't replace them and what the expectations are relative to helmet off. So those are the pieces that I have. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Spanier at this point. And if other coordinators have things as well, we will go to them, and then we'll open it up for questions when Mike is finished. Mike?
Okay, Jason, I think you covered most everything, things that we talked about and shared from our observers that have done a wonderful job in giving feedback and helping our officiating crews. Just one item in terms of the of offensive holding is that I don't know that you address this or not, but sometimes we get caught on those overpowering blocks where where the blocker just simply is bigger, faster, stronger, and overpowers the defender. And if we don't see the entire play, it may look like he was tackled. It may look like he was thrown to the ground. So don't get fooled by that one. Be sure we see the entire play. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. But I've had a couple of comments on that from coaches and from some officials. Back judge, I think we need to have you more involved in the game in total, especially now with the umpire in the backfield. We need to get you involved in the running plays in particular. Do a nice job with covering our pass plays, but when we have an obvious running situation, or if your receiver is not threatened, we want you to start in the middle of the field, middle of the line, and move out depending on the direction of the play, and focus on guard tackle, center guard tackle on either side of the line, and help on either defensive holding or perhaps an offensive holding, and also then of course on sweeps. So we need to have you involved in that, and I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. We've seen some pretty good calls, especially on sweeps and so on, where back judges have done a nice job with that. Line of scrimmage officials, there's a time when you need to act with a sense of urgency, but for the most part, we need to have you come in to the bottom of the numbers at least, depending on the play. We shouldn't be camped on the sideline. And then there's times when we have to use that sense of urgency to move in, to mark the spot, close play, to break up some or have some presence in terms of officiating after the play is over. So get a little more actively involved in that. And those comments have come from several observers during the course of the year. But overall, very pleased with the mechanics. And the questions that I know that Jason and I have received. They've been good questions and good comments, and we just need to keep up the good work.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I would agree with all those things that you said, and reiterating that the observers have been very pleased in particular with mechanics and our pre-snap positioning in particular. So I think referees and umpires, have really handled the transition well of having the umpire not only in the offensive backfield, but also taking more responsibility relative to the passer in or out of the free blocking zone, roughing the passer, targeting, involving the passer. I think umpires have just really adapted to that really well, which I'm not surprised by. We have really good officials in Minnesota. That's not shocking that we've adapted to that really well. So as Mike said, just keep up the good work in that regard. And if you do have questions on mechanics or philosophy or whatever, then shoot those over to Mike or any of our coordinators, and they're happy to assist with that. Before we close the meeting, I know Rich and Mike Graff and Steve Fillion are on. Do any of you guys have anything that you've seen that you would like to comment on at all?
Can you hear me, Jason?
Yep, I can.
The one thing I'd mention that happened like 3 places I can think of is crews being unsure of when a foul occurred relative to a change of possession. And in one of the cases, it's foul by the kicking team, and it might have occurred during the kick, and they could have tacked it on, but they weren't sure, and the receiving team didn't care because they were blowing them out, and they said, we don't want to even deal with it, just decline it. But the point is, I think it's important as a crew that you know what you would have done with it if they wanted to accept the penalty. The other 2 involved personal fouls. One was a face mask before a change, and then there was a target after the change, both by the defensive team. And the other one was a target on a defenseless receiver where the ball was knocked loose up in the air and the defense ended up with it. And in all cases, the calls were made, but because they couldn't really decide whether it happened before or after the change, they left the ball in the hands of the offending team. So I think the 2 things I'd mention there are really ask yourselves and your crews to bear down on when did that foul occur. It's an important question, and you really need to be able to answer it. And second, in the 2 cases involving the interceptions, the targeting and the face mask, and they all happened fairly close to the change. And I think as officials, we have a tendency to think, I really don't want to hurt the team that bad by taking the ball away after an interception. But the fact is if you hit somebody, targeted a defenseless receiver, and you got this bang, bang play, what are the chances that that targeting was after the interception was completed? There's no reason to feel like you've got to give the offending team a break. Like, well, shoot, coach, we know you'll really be upset if we also take away the interception. So the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is don't give them a break if they don't deserve it. I mean, if bear down and know when it happened, but also take the time to say to yourselves, that happened so close to the change that the chances that it happened after the change are slim and none, and Slim just left town, you know, that kind of thing. Each crew was upset with themselves that they had mishandled the penalty enforcement. So I guess, you know, learn from those mistakes like they have, and really bear down when you have a foul on a change of possession play. You really need, along with number and yard line, to be able to nail down when the heck it happened. But otherwise, Jason, I think you covered everything I had.
Great. So Mike, just to touch base on some of the things you said, you know, when we're talking about targeting that is against the receiver, okay, I would say that if we're calling targeting because we felt that we were taking aim and initiating contact in the head or neck area of a defenseless receiver, then you're telling me that that there's really no way that the defensive team had possession of the ball at the time of the foul, because if they did, I would tell you that that player wasn't defenseless, and you know, less likely that we're going to have, you know, targeting type action. Not impossible, but less likely. So I would say referees with your crews, a critical piece of foul reporting, you know, to you is the result of the play and the status of the ball, you know, relative to the timing of the foul. So if we're talking about during the return, during the kick, during the interception return, prior to the ball being fumbled, whatever it happens to be, those are the kind of things that have to enter into the conversation, as Mike just indicated. And referees, force your crews to give you that information, because as Mike stated, that is important information, you know, that we need when we're making those or going through penalty enforcement. So thanks, Mike. Rich, or hold on, Steve, I think you're unmuted. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple quick items that we had questions on up here up north this week from crews. If there's a penalty or foul on a defense and the penalty is enforced, it's on the defense. It should be a 40-second play clock following that. And the other thing was, what was the other thing we had? Oh, the whistle. If there's a first down inbounds and you stop the clock, the referee does not need to blow the whistle to start the clock for the game clock. The play clock's already running, but no whistle needed to start the game clock. Just wind your arm. That's all I got. Thanks, Jason.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. And Steve and I talked about that earlier this week. And I think just the one thing I would add to that Steve talked about for referees starting the game clock. If we have a first down inbounds and we're going to wind the game clock, again, no whistle, just wind her up without a whistle. But I would use a whistle if there's a situation where we feel that everyone needs to have a good idea that, you know, the clock is going to start on the ready for play. So I think, you know, crews shouldn't, or referees really shouldn't worry about, you know, being dinged, so to speak, by observers. If you blow the whistle, don't blow the whistle. But I think if there's times during the game that you think that it's critical that everyone know that the clock's going to start on the ready for play, I don't think there's anything wrong with including a whistle as part of that mechanic. So just something to consider there. And then the other part that Steve mentioned, that was a new rule this year. So just review that rule language, if you would. Rich?
Yeah, I was going to add to what Mike Spanier said regarding back judge positioning and mechanics. The one thing that I've observed, some back judges do a great job in coming up and helping with the run play and making their presence known, because we don't have that umpire in the defensive backfield. Other back judges that I've observed are 25 to 30 yards deep at the snap, and they don't need to be that deep. The majority of pass plays in high school are 20 yards or less. The occasional ones that do go deep, you have time to get back. So don't line up so deep to begin with. You'll be more likely to come up and help with that run enforcement for that play that ends 5, 7, 8 yards beyond the line of game, beyond the line of scrimmage.
Perfect. Thanks, Rich. And I think just to piggyback on what Rich just said, remember, back judges, that we're always roughly 20 yards, regardless of where it's at on the field, unless we're snapping from inside the 15. If we're snapping from inside the 15, we're going to the end line. That means that if we're snapping from the 17, you're going to be about 3-4 yards into the end zone. That's what that means. And that allows us to either, if it's a running play, come up and assist at the goal line potentially, or if it's a running play or a pass play and we read that, we can retreat back to the goal line. And I think another thing that we've probably seen as well is, I think there's that tendency to bail out of there as back judges really quickly. And let's just take one read step, read the guards. If the guards stand straight up, it's a pass. If they block down, pull, then it's a run. And if we read those kind of things, okay, then if we read run, we shouldn't take anything beyond that read step. If we read pass, we're into our back pedal, but don't let them catch up to you. They're high school kids. They run faster forward than we run backward. Okay, so we need, if we can't maintain our cushion, we got to turn our hips and go. And I'd rather that we turn our hips and officiate with our head back towards the play, like you would officiate basketball. I would rather that we do that and maintain our cushion than try to outrun receivers with a back pedal. We're going to lose that race every time. And if you don't lose that race, then I'm going to quit what I'm doing and become your agent, because you're going to get signed by the NFL at any point. So, Mike Spaniard, do you have some other pieces to cover?
Yeah. There's just a comment in the chat room about meeting with the game clock operator before the game to review aspects of their role, versus just don't assume that they're the expert.
Sure. Yep, I see that. And so good reminder, referee and line judge and back judge or line judge if possible, back judge and referee. Let's be meeting with the game clock operator, and if there's a visible play clock, we need to meet with that person as well. And remember that we as officials are not running that. That needs to be run separate, up in the booth, and outline your expectations for them. And like working with chain crews, you're going to hear from the game clock operator, well, I've been doing it for 35 years. As soon as I hear that statement, they're suspect. That means they're probably a terrible clock operator. So when you hear that statement, just kill them with kindness. Just say, you know what? I appreciate your service. This conversation is more for me than it is for you, and just take that tack, with them, and just say, hey, humor me a little bit. I go through this with every crew, with every clock operator, whether it's their first day or their 30th year. So I think they'll be receptive to that. But I think it is good, as mentioned, to meet with them. And then let's see.
Jason, one other comment I would like to make is that we need to continue to be vigilant and cognizant of proper equipment. We've had some issues with bandanas, with cloth tails on them sticking out the back. And then coaches, of course, their response is, oh, they've been doing it all year, or he did it last game, that kind of thing. Well, tonight's another night, and we're going to follow the rules on it. And so don't back off on that. It seems to, as the year goes on, that sometimes that it more and more of that appears, and then we get into the sections and so on, and in the state tournament, and we still have that issue. So if we all work on it during the course of the season, maybe we can wipe that kind of stuff out. So continue to be
Perfect.
vigilant with equipment.
Perfect, thanks.
Jason, along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
it's colder up north here than it is down there already. So we have kids with hoodies on hanging out the back, underneath their jersey. So they got the hood hanging out.
Yep.
And I've been asked, is that going to be a horse collar if they grab them by the hood, or how do we deal with the hood hanging out? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep. And the answer is, if they don't want to get yanked down by that, they shouldn't wear it.
Correct.
So-
But are we calling a horse collar or we're not?
Nope.
Okay, they didn't
Nope.
grab the jersey, yeah.
Nope. They have to grab the nameplate area or inside the collar of the jersey, shoulder pad area, and not of a sweatshirt. So, yeah, if they don't want to get dragged down by that, they shouldn't wear it. So, I know we don't want to be uniform police. That's our least favorite thing. I get it. But look for those kind of things during pregame and just say, hey, I need you to fix your towel. Do me a favor, make sure that, wristbands, towels, etc., are all what they need to be. And then during the game, we address it as they go. And if you're really having challenges with it, file a contest report. That way Mike and Bob and I can address the school if you're really having challenges with it. But I think it is really concerning when we get to state tournament time and I see illegal towels and wristbands and other things all over the place. And that tells me, for the most part, they were allowed to do it all year. If you do hear the statement, we've been allowed to do it all year, just tell them, I believe you. However, we're not going to do that tonight. I think back to a coach sending in number 70 to me and saying, I'm reporting eligible. And I went, well, that's wonderful. And I said out to the referee, he's reporting eligible. And so they run the play and we have 5 flags and they're like, we've done that all year. We told you we were reporting eligible. I said, I know you did, but unless you're signed by the Vikings between now and Sunday, I can't help you. So I think it's just pieces that we have to work through. And I think it's also getting our nose in the rules book, and being a little bit sharper, on some of those things that we maybe don't have as much interest in delving into. So, Rich, should you have another piece?
Jason,
Yeah.
quick question regarding, knee pads or lack thereof and pants that don't come down over the knee. I mean, obviously, if it's one player, a wideout that comes out, send them off for a play. The coach should make sure that he gets his pants pulled down or his knee pads in. Otherwise, he doesn't come back in the game. But what if it's a good number of players on the team? You'd hate to have to send half a dozen players off on an individual single play. Do an incident report with the league and let them address it.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. I think if it's that significant, I think that's going to take, Mike and Bob Madison and myself addressing the school and saying, you know what, having 6 people with issues with pants is too many. It's one thing to have 1 or 2,
Right.
but not to have significant numbers. And what I would say about contest reports is Mike and Bob and I can't do anything about something we don't know anything about. So if you're having issues with these things, you need to file a contest report. Otherwise, we're never going to know. And speaking of contest reports, I would remind this group, with contest reports or ejection reports, every report goes to the school. And this year, already we've had it, and it's happened in the past. We've had incident reports reviewed by lawyers and read aloud in court. And so, we just need to be real careful about what we put on those things. We need to just stick to the facts, don't editorialize, don't say it's the worst coach in history. That may be true, but it's really irrelevant relative to the report. And we just need to make sure we stick to the facts. Here's what happened. Here's what I did about it. The end. And that way, those kind of things are not really going to get scrutinized as heavily after the fact. I would say 99% of our schools are very supportive of you and the work that you do. And they want you to keep on top of safety related pieces and sportsmanship, and they're supportive of your efforts in that regard. So keep up the good work. I don't have anything else for this evening. Again, if you have any questions, mechanics, philosophy, positioning, rules, whatever it happens to be sure to send those to Mike or the regional coordinators. They're great resources. Please use them. Our observers as well. Appreciate all of their work and yours as well. So keep up the good work, stay healthy and safe, and have a good rest of the season. And look forward to seeing you in person at some point soon.